Back in the mid-1800s, Hood County was still a part of Johnson and Erath counties. Before that, it was a part of McLennan County, and before that, Navarro County, and before that, Robertson County, then Milam County, and, well, you get the picture. You see, it wasn't long ago that all you now see roundabout was nothing but brush, every kind of oak tree, cedar, pecan, cottonwood, mesquite, lots of prairie, and a big winding river which the Spaniards named Los Brazos de Dios, the Arms of God. The only folks living around these parts from ages past were the Comanche, Caddo, Lipan, Apache, Kiowa, Tonkawas, Tawakoni, and a sprinkling of a few other Native American tribes. They held undisputed possession of this land, but even they wouldn't have stated that claim at first. It was the white man who brought with him the notion of land ownership, and so it was bound to happen sooner or later. Those brave souls we call pioneers started making their way to this territory. One of the first was a couple of brothers, Charles and George Barnard. Seems that Sam Houston wanted to start setting up trading posts out in the unsettled parts of the newly formed Republic of Texas. He figured even the Indians needed a few supplies now and then, and so these two Barnard brothers were obliged to bring it to them. Scores of settlers began to arrive throughout the 1850s and created settlements all along the fertile valleys of the Brazos, Paluxy, and other rivers and streams. Most pioneers who came to these parts came from Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Missouri, and other southern states. Have you ever wondered what would persuade a family to pick up roots, move several hundred miles from everything and everyone they found familiar, and then head to an unsettled land full of danger, toil, and an uncertain future? The pioneering spirit was already ingrained into their very being, having been handed down to them from prior generations. A push-pull effect brought them out west. Poverty, crowded conditions, and loss of purpose and identity worked in harmony with the promise of new life, wide open spaces, and freedom. So they commenced to fatten up the ox and horses, load up the wagon, and began their trek out west. Texas promised them 160 acres if they would stay and farm the land. By 1852, several families had moved into the community of Acton, which at that time was known as Comanche Peak Post Office. A Mr. Hollis, the first merchant, gave the community its name of Acton. No one seems to know precisely where he came up with the name, but I suspect he named the town after a sweetheart of his, Miss Acton. Fall Creek Settlement just south of Acton was a growing community. In 1891, a tornado ripped through the area, tearing down most of the structures and mortally wounding 3 inhabitants. It soon became evident that taming the land was not the only struggle these early pioneers faced. The fearsome Comanche didn't take too kindly to the white man moving in on his land. They had begun reprisals against the white settlers in retaliation for the massacre of many of their chiefs in San Antonio at the purported peace talks in 1840. Nevertheless, marauding is just what the Comanches did long before Anglo-Saxons began populating the landscape. They were a proud, spirited lot. Adding fuel to the fire was the fact that the government never could seem to stick to any of the peace treaties and boundaries they kept drawing up, and besides all that, the arriving settlers weren't too careful to honor those boundaries anyway. Fact is, both sides were getting mighty fed up with the other. Meanwhile, the hunting parties of the Caddo, Choctaw, and other Indian tribes roamed this section of Texas, keeping cordial relations with the white settlers, while affording protection against those who were a tad more ornery. There are numerous accounts relating engagements with the Indians and testify to the bravery and perseverance of those early pioneers, women and children as well. There were, of course, soldiers stationed throughout the frontier whose purpose it was to secure protection for these vulnerable pioneers, the nearest post, that being Fort Richardson in Jacksboro County, north of Palo Pinto County. Most settlers were content to farm the land and raise stock. A few enterprising souls decided to bring industry and commerce to the area. One such family was the Nutts. Jesse Nutt came to this area along with his father-in-law, Abe Landers, and family, and settled about 3 miles up the river. Shortly after Jesse's arrival, his father and mother, along with his brothers, Jacob, Abel, and David, and sister Susan joined him. Oh, and I won't hesitate to mention that Jesse and Jacob Nutt had been blind since childhood. Even so, those two blind fellers were a lot more visionary than most sighted folks. The numerical strength, charity, moral standing, and enterprising nature of these families greatly influenced the destiny of Granbury, although for a while Granbury, the name decided upon for the county seat of the newly formed Hood County, had not yet found a home.